Magic the Gathering, The Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth adapts the fantasy epic by J.R.R. Tolkien into a trading card game for you to play with your fellowship. If you've got yourself some cards but don't know where to start, just like Frodo, you don't have to go it alone. We're here to teach you how to play this immersive new set. Looking at a pile of Magic cards for the first time can be a bit overwhelming. To help you understand what you're seeing, let's review the kind of cards you'll be playing with. First are land cards. These represent places and are the resource mechanic of Magic. You can tap a land, turn it sideways, to generate mana, and this process is key as mana is what you spend to cast spells. Most lands come in one of 5 colours: white, blue, black, red, and green. Each colour has its own playstyle that can be mixed and matched with others. You can play 1 land card per turn. Creature cards represent the brave friends and ferocious monsters that you can summon to fight for you, and they will likely make up the bulk of your deck. The term permanent refers to a card that sticks around on the battlefield after you play, or in Magic speak, cast it. Creatures are permanents, and so too are artifacts and enchantments. Artifacts are often colourless, meaning they can be cast with any colour mana, but there are some exceptions. They can represent physical objects like books, weapons, and rings. Enchantments are also permanents that grant other cards, usually creatures, additional abilities or produce magical effects to help control the battlefield. Unlike artifacts, they require a specific colour of mana to cast. Instants and sorceries are spells that resolve after they're played. You can cast them, get an effect, and then they are put into a discard pile known as the graveyard. As their name suggests, instants can be cast instantly, on any player's turn, meaning they can be used for reactionary or defensive play. Sorceries, however, can only be cast on your turn. Now let's tackle all the text and symbols. Here's how to read a Magic card. In the top left is the name of the card, Bag End Porter, and on the right is its mana cost. This tells you how much and what types of mana you need to play the card. For example, Bag End Porter costs 3 generic mana, which can be paid with mana of any colour, and 1 green mana, totaling 4. Next is the type line. This tells you what kind of card it is: land, creature, artifact, enchantment, instant, or sorcery. Creatures will have a subtype listed. On this card, that's Dwarf. On this same line is the expansion symbol. Each Magic release has a unique symbol that designates the set, and its colour represents the individual card's rarity. Black is common, silver is uncommon, gold is rare, and red signals a mythic rare card. The text box explains what the card does. Bag End Porter has what is called a triggered ability. When it attacks, an effect is immediately triggered. This card temporarily makes itself stronger based on the number of legendary creatures you control. Legendary is a word you'll find on some type lines that means you can only control one of that specific card at a time. The italicized text at the bottom of this box is flavor text. It has no effect on play, it just provides a nugget of world building. Finally, creatures have 2 numbers in the bottom right corner. The left number is power, how much damage it does in combat, and right number is toughness, how much damage an opponent must inflict to destroy that creature. Bag End Porter has 4 power and 4 toughness. Now you know how individual cards function, let's walk through the phases that make up a game of Magic the Gathering. Each turn consists of 5 phases. The beginning phase, the main phase, the combat phase, the post-combat main phase, or second main phase, and the ending phase. Your turn starts with the beginning phase, where you untap all your permanents, such as the lands you previously tapped for mana, and any creatures you attacked with during your last turn. Abilities that trigger on your upkeep trigger here. Then you draw 1 card from your deck, known as your library. Next is the main phase, where you can play a land to produce more mana before casting any creatures or spells. Once you're ready to attack, it's time to move to the combat phase. Combat in Magic involves declaring which of your creatures are attacking. To indicate this, you'll tap them. Combat damage is done directly to the opposing player, but they can prevent losing life points by choosing to block with creatures of their own. After declaring which of their creatures they want to use to block your attacking creature, all creatures will deal damage at the same time. Any creatures that are tapped won't be able to block on the next turn. A second main phase follows after combat, where you can take more game actions if you wish. This is handy as sometimes you might want to save spells for after combat so you have more information about the state of the game. Here is where you can play a land if you haven't already, or cast more creatures and spells if you have the mana to do so. Once you've finished your turn, it's time to clean things up in the ending phase. If a creature took damage but didn't die, that damage heals. If you have more than 7 cards in your hand, you'll have to discard cards from your hand until only 7 remain. Then, it's your opponent's turn. It wouldn't be a journey through Middle-earth without the enticing power of the One Ring. To illustrate that, Tales of Middle-earth adds a unique mechanic to Magic where some cards have abilities that include the text, "The ring tempts you." The first time the ring tempts you in a game, you gain an emblem called the ring. Emblems aren't permanents. They don't exist on the battlefield and can't be destroyed. Instead, they apply abilities to the player who possesses them. After gaining the ring, you choose one of your creatures to be your ring bearer. If you don't have any creatures when the ring tempts you, it will have no bearer until it tempts you again. At this point, the ring also gets its first ability, which empowers your ring bearer. Each time the ring tempts you, you can pick a new ring bearer and the ring gains an additional ability, following in order as outlined on the emblem card. Both you and your opponent can get the ring as an emblem and each have a ring bearer. Just as in the novels, the ring promises power, but it also puts a target on the back of its bearer. Will it be a blessing or a curse? Let's find out by putting everything we've learned into practice with an example game. When you and a friend sit down with your Magic decks, you become enemies on either side of a battlefield. You each start with 20 life points and kick things off by shuffling your decks before drawing 7 cards, known as your hand. A good starting hand will have a mix of card types and at least 2 lands. For this game, we'll be going first. A special rule for the very first turn of the game is that the starting player skips drawing a card from their library. Since we can only play 1 land card each turn, we begin by placing a plains onto the battlefield. We have no spells that we're able to cast, so we end our turn and pass over to our opponent. Our opponent wasn't the starting player, so they draw a card to begin their turn. They play their land, a swamp, and pass back to us. On our second turn, we draw a card, play a forest, and can now cast a spell. Meriadoc Brandybuck costs 1 generic mana and 1 green mana. So we tap our plains and forest to generate enough white and green mana to pay his cost. We can't attack yet, however. Creatures are normally limited by a summoning sickness, a kind of magical disorientation when they enter the battlefield, meaning they can't attack during the turn you first play them. Since we have no more lands available to make mana, our turn is over. Our opponent plays a mountain, then taps their lands to bring out Goblin Assailant. It can't attack us yet, but it will be able to block during our next turn. Now it's our turn again, we untap the lands we tapped last turn. Then we draw a card. Aha! We have drawn You Cannot Pass, an instant that lets us destroy a creature that blocks our attack. Remember, instants can be played at any time, so we can be tricky here. If we attack with Meriadoc Brandybuck and our opponent blocks with Goblin Assailant, both creatures will die and be sent to the graveyard. We'll skip the first main phase and go straight to combat and declare attackers by tapping Meriadoc Brandybuck. He has a triggered ability, so we create a food token. Tokens aren't technically cards, so if they leave the battlefield for any reason, they cease to exist, rather than being sent to the graveyard. Our opponent decides to block with Goblin Assailant. And before we agree to have our creatures deal damage to each other, we have an opportunity to play You Cannot Pass. We tap our planes, cast our spell, and target Goblin Assailant. It dies and is put into the graveyard before it can hurt our creature. But because Meriadoc Brandybuck is still considered blocked, it won't damage our opponent. We've won a battle, but we still have the rest of our turn to play. In the post-combat main phase, we play another Plains and cast the Westfold Rider in our hand. We pass to our opponent, who untaps their lands, plays a swamp, and taps their lands again to generate 1 red mana and 2 black mana. They have a sorcery, a card they can only play on their turn, and they cast Claim the Precious, a spell designed to kill a creature. Goodbye, Meriadoc Brandybuck. Our opponent is also tempted by the ring, so they'll get their emblem and choose a ring bearer. Luckily for us, they don't have any creatures to be their ring bearer. We put our creature into our graveyard when it's destroyed, and Claim the Precious is put into our opponent's graveyard. That's all they can do this turn, so it's back to us. We untap, draw, and now have a defenseless opponent. As they don't have any creatures on the battlefield, now is the time to seize our advantage. Let's play a forest and cast Dunedain Blade, an artifact type called an equipment. Equipments enter the battlefield and have an equip cost that we can pay to attach it to one of our creatures to provide a buff. Equipment stays on the battlefield even if the creature it's attached to dies, so they're useful cards for consistently making your creatures stronger. Since Westfold Rider is a human, we only have to pay 1 generic mana to equip Dunedain Blade to it. Now that Westfold Rider is more powerful, let's attack our opponent. When our creature deals damage directly to the opponent loses the same number of life points. They'll take 5 damage here, a whopping 1/4 of their life total. This kind of play continues until someone's life total is reduced to 0. Now that you're equipped to sling cards with your friends, you can recreate your favourite moments from the legendary stories by Tolkien, or write your own epic fantasy with these familiar characters. This video is designed as a starting point for learning to play Magic, and there are lots of rules and abilities we don't have time to go over. So if you're ever in doubt about what a card can do, or you want to dive deeper into the intricacies of how to play, check out magic.wizards.com. The Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth is out now on MTG Arena and in stores. For more on Middle-earth and trading card games, stick with IGN.